Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy. We are the show where we have guests from the AWS community. We talk about FinOps and generative AI, try to answer your questions. My name's Stephen Barr.
Hi everyone, I'm Rahul Subramaniam, and today we have a very, very special guest. I will let the guest introduce himself. He has amazing energy and such an amazing story to tell.
Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
having me. First of all, I'm Basil Fateen. I'm the principal technology evangelist at AWS with a focus on generative AI, content, and services. And I'm really happy to be with you guys. I mean, I'm a big fan of the show, and honestly, I've been waiting for a while, and I don't know what took you so long. And I've been, being as strategic as I can be to get on your radar. But at least we finally got here, and it's an honor to be with you.
No, thanks for pointing out that mistake. We will make sure to not have that repeated
We're
again.
so glad to have you. And like I said, generative AI, AWS, technology evangelism, content creation. How have we not had you already? But we are going to make up for that with a killer episode, hopefully one of
That's what I was wondering. I was just literally every night staring out of my window wondering this. How am I not on the show? No,
Awesome.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate your invitation. I'm really happy to be with you.
Our pleasure. So tell us a little bit about your journey, Basil. How did you get started with technology and then AWS and being part of this amazing ecosystem?
Sure. It's a bit of an odd journey I've had. So my life until maybe 30 was very much divided between the technical and the creative. And those were two very separate worlds for a long time. So I studied computer science and I went down the software development rabbit hole for about 10 years, developing, like I was telling you, the first job I had, we were developing a mobile app for the Symbian operating system, which is Nokia, right? And we were developing, get this. You're going to appreciate this, Rahul. It was a mobile location-based social network pre-smartphones. So we were triangulating where you are based on cell phone towers. It was mental. But it really taught us a lot and thickened our skin. And I went down that path for a while. And then I started to get into web development. And then I was a full stack developer for many years. And then I became a product manager, then a product consultant. And throughout this path, I was also writing and, creating these short films. And I published a novel in my 20s. And these worlds were very, very separate with separate like social groups and music. And I was two different people until at some point, I took the plunge and I left a very comfortable, high-paying job at one of the big software houses to start my own startup. And that's where these two worlds crashed majestically into each other because, as you know, as an early stage startup founder, you wear many hats. You have to wear many hats. True. And I was lucky enough to have those hats already in the closet. I was building software, so I built the code base, and it was a machine learning based startup. But then I was also, writing the content and the marketing to get us in front of people with zero budgets and be able to position ourselves in the middle of these huge competitors. The startup itself, it was a recruitment technology-based startup. I ran into the issue when I was hiring for my teams when I was a product consultant at this software house. And it became very clear to me that the recruitment process itself is an absolute nightmare for everyone. It's just horrendous and soul-crushing, and nobody's happy. The applicants are not happy. The hiring manager is not happy. The recruiters are not happy. And I was just in awe that there could be this critical process in society that's just horrible. Like how is this? How can't it just be more automated and smarter and better? And that's when I started to, I used elements of gamification. I used elements of like personalized kind of assessments. Then I started to use machine learning to be able to kind of match CVs with job descriptions. And I just want to point out that this was before AI was cool. So I was building my own machine learning models way before all of this wave came. And that's a badge I wear proudly. And it so happened at the time that I launched, the startup on AWS. And I remember at the time, and I remember very clearly my first experience. I remember the first EC2 instance I launched, and that feeling of, wow, this is just there suddenly, like it's, I just pressed a button and now there's a server out there and there's a database and I'm just plugging them together. It was really incredible at the time, that I didn't need to call someone in IT because that's how we used to do things in the company I was in. And I remember there were two particular things that made me really appreciate AWS at the time. The first is seeing, number one, how many services there were. And of course, back then, there were not anywhere near as many as there are now, but it was still really impressive. All of these building blocks that you could put together to create things and test ideas and create these scalable infrastructures. But also, I remember it was the pace of new services and innovations that really impressed me. Is that I was finding, like, on a monthly basis, I'm getting these emails, hey, there's these new services, there's new updates to S3, there's this kind of managed service now, so it kind of cuts out a lot of these steps. And I felt that this is really, with AWS, I felt like I was always at the cutting edge of what's next, and that made me, as a technologist, super excited. And then the second thing is, when the team reached out and the account managers and the solution architects, and I started to understand that, so the value of AWS is not just in terms of providing this cutting edge technology, but it's as a strategic business partner. These people are actually helping me reach my goals, and it's a win-win situation, and it's a great relationship. And all of that team, I remember also, I was very impressed because they were coming from that world. They understood startups, and they understood, what are the challenges of this early stage. So they were really able to help me when I needed help. And that was a really great experience. And AWS was a big part of that journey, which was about 7-year roller coaster ride, an incredible adventure. The team grew to about 12. We raised funding. We branched out into multiple markets. And the first major strategic market I came to was Dubai, where I am still until now here. And I was really impressed with the general air of innovation here, and that everyone's kind of here to really do something. People aren't just floating here. Everyone's here to try to create something or rock the boat, or there's just like this hustling energy, and that I found that really attractive, and lots of interesting people from all around the world. And I love multicultural environments, and this is as multicultural as you can get. It's an absolute melting pot from all levels. And I also love food from all around the world. That didn't hurt either. So I came here with one of the accelerators, Smart City Dubai. And then I just stayed, and things started to continue to go very well. And then COVID happened, and that became a good kind of time to end this journey. And, someone was interested in the IP, and, we talked about that. And then I found myself in that limbo phase of, well, what next? I know myself as a founder for the last 7 years. What am I going to go do, like work in an office now after that like bizarre adventure I was just on? And I kept looking at role. Like at first I thought, like, should I start another startup? And I started to, think about different ideas. And then people kept sharing with me interesting roles, but they were always like, but I feel like it's so distant from the experience I just had. And then at some point, someone shared with me the role of principal startup advocate at AWS. And I was reading the role description, and I was like, this is a joke or something. This is like exactly who I am. Everything I love to do, everything I'm passionate about. It brings cutting edge technology with communication and storytelling and content and marketing. And I get to work with passionate, interesting entrepreneurs all over EMEA. And I was extremely excited to apply, and I got it, and that became the exciting new chapter. I was principal startup advocate from 2022 to earlier this year for EMEA, which was an incredible experience. And then I shifted to principal technology evangelist, and now I'm with you guys on the show.
That is such an incredible journey, and I think it relates so much to what you talked about Dubai and the AWS setup, the solutions architects and the TAMs and everyone there. So just sharing a few experiences. So I moved to Dubai in 2008 to start our international headquarters and stuff over there, set up a few companies. And funnily enough, AWS, I think, came in a few years later into Dubai, and they were in the next building. And we were already all in on AWS back in 2008. And I think with the number of accounts we had, we were probably AWS's largest customer in the region.
Nice.
So literally, I kid you not, I think at least 2 or 3 days a week, there used to be a coffee shop at the bottom of Al Thuraya 2. And we were in Al Thuraya 1. Those are 2 buildings in Media City. Our office is there. But I think the 2 or 3 folks at AWS, And us, we used to just walk down. We say, okay, shall we meet up for coffee? And then we'd spend an hour just talking about what's next in AWS, what's big,
Yeah.
how should
Yeah.
we do something? And it used to be amazing. I think I'll never forget those experiences where just over coffee we'd be discussing, what next for AWS? How do you build the next big thing? What's coming, and how do you leverage it to the maximum extent possible? And that relationship was absolutely amazing. And
That's
from there,
very
kind
cool.
of my association with AWS grew by leaps and bounds.
It's amazing also that you were physically in the same place, so you could literally just be involved and understand where everything's happening almost on a day-by-day basis, right? And I
Pretty
think
much.
that phase particularly, there was so many new things happening, right? Like there was a huge
Exactly.
period of technological growth and new services and innovations happening specifically then. So it must have been very interesting.
No, it absolutely was. And I still remember the experience where we were discussing when Bahrain got launched or when Bahrain was announced,
Yeah.
then all the plans that were happening for what's going to happen in Bahrain. Then we actually flew down to Bahrain for the inauguration of the data centers over there and set up, and then meeting with the community over there was amazing. Like they wanted to learn, okay, what have you guys done with AWS in the past? And so we were more like the customer testimonials to showcase all the kinds of things you could do with. And that partnership, I think, still stands. It's been absolutely amazing over the last 16, 17 years now.
That's amazing.
That
That's
we've been
amazing.
on the AWS platform. So yeah,
Yeah.
tons to learn.
And it's cool always to see new regions also, like the fact that Saudi Arabia is launching soon, like that announcement that everyone that became like this big new second wind in the region. That's such a huge market, and so many interesting innovators there, and that was I was very happy to hear about that.
It's funny going back to where you started in the conversation, thinking about these regions, and the first time you start an EC2 instance, that's it. I just push this button and you get this IP address. And all of us have had this background in startups, right, where you're doing everything. And unless you've physically built a rack, and slid in 42 servers and dealt with the wiring and the cables and those stupid little clips and like it's so much work.
I'm feeling instant anxiety as you're just describing this,
right? And you drop one of those things and it slides down the rack, and all of a sudden you're on your hands and knees trying to, and then just think that's all I need to do to get a server is just push this button and wait 3 seconds.
But Steven, you know what? I would say when I was doing all of that, I found that a little easier. What is even harder is if you were, as I was in India, and I was running operations out of India. And then I would have to call up somebody in Texas in the middle of nowhere and say, go drive up 1.5 hours to the data center because the machine is not responding. Nothing is working. So can you drive up to the data center and then just wait patiently in the middle of the night, like 2 and 3 a.m., hoping that somebody would go up to the place and then call you once they got in. And then they'd be like, oh, this wire was just a little loose and I plugged it back in. And you had to wait for like 6 hours for that to happen.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was even more, frustrating when you're just sitting around waiting for someone to go from, some city in Texas to some remote data center location to just fix a wire.
It sounds absolutely absurd right now that someone had to physically go to check a data center and if there's more load, they need to do things physically. And I'm always reminded of something my dad used to tell me, because my father's also in software, and he was one of the early people working on the mainframes when they came to Egypt, which is where I'm from. And as much as we now laugh at the absurdity of that situation like 15 or 20 years ago, when I started in software about 20 years ago, he used to tell me about the absurdity when he was working in the mainframes, where they had a building where they wrote the code on the cards, and then he had to get on a bus to compile it somewhere else. Now that's
my mom
a whole
used to do the same
level
thing
of
with
absurdity.
me. Yeah, my mom used to program on punch cards at one point
the cards,
of time. And we used to have a bunch of them at home. And the absurdity of writing your programs on that, and then shipping it off to another city.
And you have to wait and imagine if you've done like a really silly like syntax error, and you just find out like the amount of time it takes. It's not just an instant compile. It's you have to wait and then be like, oh, how did I make that mistake?
You have to wait for the reams of paper to come back.
Yeah.
and look at the printouts on those
Yeah.
dot matrix like printers. Actually, I don't think it was dot matrix. It was something else, but it was like dot matrix printers.
Yeah.
They would have those results in there in
Yeah.
reams of paper,
Yeah.
and then you look at it and say, "Oh, damn, I made a mistake. Let's
Yeah.
start again."
Yeah, and it really puts like when we're looking at all of these things, it really puts the factor of time really under that spotlight, and that's really the thing that I think a lot of people are not grasping right now with what we're happening in the middle of this exponential shift. Is that it's not just a really powerful smart technology. It's that suddenly you can do so many things faster. So then what's the implication of that? We're going to find out what is the implication of this. Like, it's very hard to predict when now you can really put things out there and test them in a fraction of the time. And the amounts of people who could do that are now also much broader. You don't need to be a technologist to build technology now, or at least early versions of technology. And that's just an important distinction to make. There's a difference between prototyping and just getting something out there and building something that's actually scalable and a product that, end users can use all around the world. But the fact that more people can even get into that conversation is really incredible.
Correct. And unfortunately, time is shrinking so fast that gap is also going to be closed very, very soon, the way things are going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess speaking of these new technologies, so I want to, as a perfect segue into generative AI. Yeah. So Basil, what was your moment when you first used, or when it clicked to you that like, okay, this is the next thing. This is what you want to be involved with. Like, do you remember when that was, or what you were doing that made that like, oh, this is more than just a neat novelty? I think, because I worked in machine learning before generative AI, my first wow moment was when I optimized the model and ran a sample resume through it, and I tested it with like blind tests with recruiters, and I found that it was matching what they were doing to a very high degree of accuracy, just absurdly faster. That was my first wow moment. And when I actually showed it when I was demoing it for like HR managers and stuff, they thought I had rigged something. Like, they were like, there's no way that it knew that this person's CV, which is a very complex and a lot of weird background, that they would be a fit for this role even without the main keywords, because it looks at overall relationships, right? And this is something that also is important to understand, is that even with generative AI, it's math. It's math. At the end of the day, it's these statistical relationships between things. It's just on a very different level with a much more advanced algorithm, which is the transformer, model. But that was my first wow moment. And then obviously, when ChatGPT came out, and then it became conversational, and I think with all of us, it wasn't just the how smart it was the user experience, which is the key thing for any product. It was that user experience of being able to just talk with something. Like, you don't need to be a data scientist to get that wow moment anymore. You could just talk, then instantly, like, I remember after that first chat that I had, I immediately started to think about, okay, how's this going to change software? Because this is like, once this becomes an API, wow, now we're going to ride that wave. And I knew that AWS already had a lot of time working on AI and machine learning, so I was very excited to see what was about to roll out, and I'm very satisfied with what I've been seeing over time rolling out, keeping very much the future in mind, and not like trying to just catch up, but actually trying to see what's coming ahead and predicting new use cases and predicting new scenarios and new kinds of users who are going to use it. And I'm just really excited about how things are developing, because on one hand, it's extremely exciting. On the other, it's overwhelming for most people. I feel like most people are truly overwhelmed with the rate of innovations. Like, you almost like, when you get used to a couple of tools in a couple of weeks, it's obsolete. Now you're like, oh, there's this new thing, right? You're still using that 3 weeks ago. That's like the dark ages, So people are quite overwhelmed, and I think people are still finding it difficult to go beyond the traditional just like brainstorming use cases or generating images or stuff, and really understanding how will this fit in with my particular workflow and make me more impactful in what I do. This is where everyone's trying to figure it out right now. And I like to call it a dance, because it's a dance now between two entities. It's not going to
do something for you. And it's that dance. And there's going to be the software developer AI dance. There's going to be the creative AI dance, and optimizing that dance and figuring out the best places within the workflow is really going to be the focus of this next phase. And this is what I'm very excited to contribute to, just in terms of helping people figuring it out and trying different workflows and simplifying things, and not making it so overwhelming with people to figure out that dance within their workflows.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry, because CloudFix uses AWS recommended savings techniques. It fixes, not just finds. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part of all, it works non-stop. Stop overspending on AWS and click on the link to start saving now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is so transformational. Speaking specifically of Dubai, so one of my observations in the recent past is that the product and idea cycles have shrunk so much that we are now talking about days, if not weeks, or weeks, if not days, of iterating on an idea and getting it out for people to figure out, or try to figure out whether there's a good product market fit or not.
Yeah.
So here your product cycle is, maybe a week or 2 weeks, in which time new innovation is already coming in. And the next big thing is, being talked about. On the other hand, the sales cycles, or even convincing customers and using the usage or adoption, is still 6 months, right? Especially particularly with enterprises.
Yeah.
Dubai is a very, very different market from the rest of the world, in the sense that, like you said, there's a lot of hustle. Things move faster than anywhere else in the world. It's all about getting there first. It's bigger, the biggest thing, the fastest thing. There's almost a culture of wanting to be first in many ways. So what is the environment like in Dubai when it comes to the buzz around AI, the adoption of AI in real world scenarios? How are customers viewing this? Are they adopting it as fast as or as slow as the rest of the world? What does the curve look like? Tell us a little bit about that whole region.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things that really impressed me when I first came here, and this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of, there's been a ministry of AI here for a while. Before this hype, there was a minister of AI, like I think from maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago,
2017 or so,
2016,
2017.
Something like that. A minister of AI, an entire ministry dedicated to AI before all of this hype. And you have models like the Falcon model that came out of TII in Abu Dhabi, which is one of the top open source models. And there's a lot of also Arabic language models coming out, which is like when you start to localize these models, then you really, really provide impact to a lot of people that, were cut off, from the English language. So that's always been here. And I think they're very much ahead of the curve because of that. To answer your question about the adoption, I think it's the same challenges everywhere that everyone's facing right now, and it is necessary challenges to figure out. It's not a bad problem. It's just a natural problem.
A different problem
with this new thing. So it's about pricing. It's about dependability in production. It's about scalability. The same thing, same challenges that you'd face with any transformational technology. Because I think I always refer to the Gartner hype cycle, is that the peak of inflated expectations, it was last year when everyone was like, everything's going to change right now. No, that's not how it works. Everyone got a bit too excited, and rightfully so, it is exciting. But then we realized we had the sobering reality of that. Like, okay, we're not there yet. We're getting there. And now it's really about figuring out the more boring steps to get there. The pricing, like the tokenomics. Like really, how do you include the token unit economics within your unit economics as a startup or as a business? And then the other part of that is the ROI. Because it's great to say we're now an AI powered startup or we're AI powered enterprise, but then there has to be an ROI because it's a business, right? It's not just marketing. There has to be a tangible dollar value that you're getting back. And that's another thing that businesses and startups are finding challenging right now. And it's just a matter of figuring that out. Now, the good thing is that the changes happening now, so models are getting cheaper. It's getting like the tokens are decreasing in costs. And
True.
I especially love the approach that AWS has taken in democratizing access to models. And I love that because it wasn't just about, okay, so we're going to now develop this other model that's going to compete for the king of the models. They understood, those very smart people understood that that's not how it's going to be. That's not the best value to offer our customers. It's going to be different models do different things well, and maybe there's going to be an interaction web between different models and different agents, and it's just going to be more complex than one model takes all. That's where it's going, and as it's changing, as it's getting, their performance is getting higher, and you're seeing the rate of new models and new versions coming out. Like I can't tell you guys. I honestly feel almost emotional about Claude 3 at this point since it came out. I mean, it really has changed a lot of my life, and I know that sounds weird. I don't mean it in like the traditional emotional.
No, I was thinking the exact same thing.
You know what I mean?
Especially 3.5 Sonnet, right?
It's amazing.
That's the go-to model.
It's amazing. For technical work, also for analyzing large documents and helping with ideation to code generation and cloud formation scripts and really nitty gritty like things that you might have struggled with for days, and they're not challenging on an intellectual level. It just takes time. The fact that it could
just grunt work, tons of grunt work to be done.
It's beautiful.
As an example project, I was working with a colleague, and we had an old mailbox of some messages from a former colleague. We just wanted to see if there's anything useful in there.
Yeah.
It was like 70,000 messages. So first thing, I type into Claude, how do I parse these mbox files?
Yeah.
Okay, done.
Yeah.
Then I dump it into Bedrock knowledge bases. Okay, done. Then, okay, I didn't formulate my .metadata.json quickly, so I need a bash script using JQ to fix this. Okay, so I use Claude Sonnet again. That took about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And then, like, literally in the course of a half-hour meeting on a Friday, we all of a sudden we had 70,000 emails loaded up into knowledge bases. Yeah. We're talking to it in natural language, saying, what was the status of the discussion between X and Y?
It's absurd.
And it's this would have been a really complicated project.
Yeah.
A knowledge
transfer. Months.
Yeah. And this was literally just kind of goofing around on an afternoon, saying, okay, well, how far can we get with Bedrock knowledge bases?
Yeah. And so I love this example that you've given, right? Because this is one of the things that I put a lot of content around this specifically, because I think it's very, very important. So a lot of people, until now, I'd say the majority of people still see their relationship with generative AI in terms of do this for me and it does it for them, right? And just in terms of like that basic prompt of you do this for me. So I see that there's at this point, of course, it's things that will develop quickly with time, but at this point, there's really 3 ways to level up instantly with generative AI. The first is to truly understand prompt engineering, and by prompt engineering, I don't just mean be better at describing what you want, because that is a big part of it. But for me, there was a paradigm shift when, and this was from experimentation, when I realized that it's not about telling it what to do, it's about understanding who you need it to be to help you achieve an objective back and forth. That was a huge paradigm shift for me. Right. Just being able to frame it in that way, and then it narrows down who it is and the kind of information it gives, because it has so much information, right? It just narrows it down. And then when you give it the ability, like this was one of the things that blew my mind, is saying, don't assume anything, ask me questions. And then it becomes a back and forth. That is a whole different, you're in a different stratosphere at that point when it becomes back and forth, right? So prompt engineering in that way, and figuring out that optimized dance to get what you want at the end of the day by it being a certain kind of person with a background. The second thing is what you mentioned, is knowledge bases. It has a lot of data, but it does not necessarily have contextual data for your use case, right? And everyone has that little bit of data that can help it really help you figure out things more. So being able to feed in your data into that knowledge base, so it makes it much smarter in helping you, that becomes that second level of getting more of what you want. And then the third is utilizing agents, where it plugs in to your systems and it's able to take tasks and make them sequential and use steps in your systems to connect with your email servers or your data or different APIs. And then it does things and it sends emails and then it actually takes actions in the world.
All right.
This is unbelievable. Like these three things right now. And I'll say this again. We might all look back at this conversation in 3 months and say, "Wow, we had no idea that it was going to get so crazy after that." We just were talking about those 3 little steps. But at this point, those 3 steps can really up level the value you get from generative AI.
Yeah, I'm already seeing number 4 and 5. Right,
tell me.
Coming up on the horizon. The next one is memory and knowledge graphs.
Yeah.
Which is holding long-term memory about conversational context and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's one. The next one is having complex workflows and feedback cycles between autonomous agents.
Yes.
And that capability started off about 6-8 months ago with a big bang, but kind of fizzled out a little bit because of the capabilities of the LLMs. But now, they're becoming even more relevant.
Yeah.
And like one of the conversations we were just having a couple of hours ago with some colleagues, they're like, I just like a set of agents to work all night while I'm asleep to go figure out
Make
and
me
just
money.
brainstorm and just brainstorm this particular idea and tell me everything I need to know in the morning in a one-pager. Right?
Yes.
Go search
Yes.
the world, research this topic, and give me all the deep insights I need, and just have a team of agents that just does that through the night. And now that's
Well, I love what you were saying about how you actually have to give it a personality, right? Because I think we all have to wear multiple hats throughout the day. Sometimes I'm, a technology optimist. Well, I'm always an optimist, but then sometimes I have to be a pragmatist. Sometimes I have to be, make trade-offs. But you can create a network of agents. Say, okay, you're the big picture. You tell me all the negative. Be the cynic. You be the positive. You be the hype person. And you can actually get all the different perspectives that you want to consider.
Yes.
You can get them.
Yeah. And the extra amazing thing, which is going to be happening as a result of these new 4 and 5 developments, is the new layers of data that comes from these interactions and these experiments. So all this last year and a half, and for the next year of us trying things with large language models and the agents and seeing how they work together, that in and of itself becomes a new layer of data to continuously optimize, because we're not necessarily always approaching it logically. And that's one of those things, right? Is that we come in with assumptions, we come in with prejudice, we come in with whatever blind spots, and this is a really important thing, is that, and this is a continuous wow moment for me, is that through the back and forth, whether I'm doing something technical or creative with an LLM, sometimes I realize that I have blind spots, certain blind spots. I was going into this task totally not realizing that I should have looked at these 3 things. I had a very specific objective, and if I had just narrowed down and trying to achieve it, it would have taken much longer. But that it told me that I had certain blind spots and that we need to kind of maybe look at that first. That just, it changes the objective, and that's, so it's not just helping you achieve the objective you think is the best objective. It can slightly alter it to get you to actually what you wanted when you didn't realize you wanted it. You know what I mean? Which is very absurd.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
No, it's a very, very exciting time to be here. I think we get very few people get the opportunity to be at a time where you see these massive transformational changes and be involved in it or be a part of it and literally witness things evolving. And I think we've been lucky to be part of 2. One is the big internet revolution, and the second one is this, which is AI. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. 100%. And I'll tell you something, honestly, I'm very thankful that not only do I exist in this time, but I existed in the time before. I'm very thankful that I saw the pre-internet world. I got a little glimpse. I didn't get a big glimpse. It was just like a few years of me as like a teenager without that world at all, and we saw it come in.
Right.
And I'm happy that I saw it come in, and I saw the change. And I remember even with the terminologies, like, I went online yesterday. You know,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying, right? You went online at some point also.
I dialed in to my internet connection.
Yeah. And it's these terminologies that when you see how they disappeared, you understand also that like right now when we're talking about AI and using AI, at some point that's going to disappear. It's just going to be part of the fabric. It's just going to be there.
Correct.
It's not going to be like, how do I utilize this new LLM? It's just going to be part of everything.
Correct.
Or even it's being lost, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm in the city and I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen to our kids' generation.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Yeah.
I had a cousin who he was in Europe somewhere and he was on this tour and he really wasn't getting much out of it. And so he literally just pulled out his phone, put on his AirPods, GPT 4.0, tell me some interesting facts about what you see.
Yeah.
And he said he got a much better tour experience from GPT 4.0 and said, no, I want it in the context of historical battles. Tell me about the historical battles that happened here.
Yeah. It's definitely gonna change things. Now, as excited I am about technology, I understand that there's always going to be pros and cons, and there's going to be things we lose. Everything's a sacrifice in life, right? So I don't want to make it seem like it's just going to be totally roses. It's going to be an uncomfortable phase, and there's going to be some things we might lose. But it's pointless to say, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because it's absolutely inevitable. So I think we just all close our eyes, hope for the best, and just try to be truthful with each other about our experiences and the best way to use it, and to really help each other figure out those guardrails to make sure that we're all using this new technology as a net positive for everyone. That's, I think, the most important thing. But it's happening, and there's not much to do about it.
Well, I guess to drill down on that, so bringing it back to your role as a startup mentor, if you're starting a startup, you've got some great idea, and you have a few options in front of you. One of them is, okay, go, say you don't know how much about programming, but you've got an idea. Do you go out and hire somebody? Do you try and learn AI to help you program? Like, how would you approach this as a startup founder with these new tools at your disposal?
Well, I mean, speaking as someone who was lucky enough to have the technical side, like I was a full stack engineer before I started my startup. So I had that benefit of, I knew how to build a front end and a back end by the time I started my startup. Now, when I look back at the amounts of literal years I could have saved if I had these tools that were available now, and like whenever I see a new release or like a new kind of AI development environment, or just something that I know is going to really help developers, there's one part of me that's so excited, and then another part that's like kind of a darker part that's just like so jealous that I didn't have that like 10 years ago, like I wish I had that. It would have saved me so much time. But so it's going to kind of help cover your weak spots if you are a bit technical, and then that really turns any kind of technical person into a full stack developer who's able to put out prototypes right away and validate your ideas. And obviously this is coming at a time where the startup world itself has had so many iterations that everyone understands the need for validation right now. And this is why I called my channel MVP Lab. It's do not pass go. And I've been stung by this assumption that I know that this solution is great. This is going to change the world. I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs, because it just makes sense. Like, this is a problem. There's a solution. I'm going to be rich. It's just a matter of time. And then the universe, corrects you, sometimes very brutally. And I think there's been so many of these stories and understandings and learnings that entrepreneurs understand you have to absolutely validate. And you don't even need to get to the MVP to validate. You could validate with a series of prototypes to check the market need, to check the technical feasibility, just like as these check marks. And this is one of the things that I talk about a lot with MVP Lab, is that you're not just validating to kind of make yourself confident. That gives everyone else confidence to join you. So team members, early investors, early clients, the fact that you are looking at the data to validate that you're going in the right direction, that gives everyone more confidence in your direction. And it also gives you more insights to increase your odds of success, because you just have more data. by building these prototypes. So the fact that more people can build prototypes quicker, that's really incredible. To get to your question about someone who's completely non-technical, I think we're still not at the place right now where anyone who's totally non-technical can build prototypes, but we will get there very quickly. With the second thing I will say is that still doesn't mean that they will deploy a fully, robust application as a non-technical person. I don't see that honestly happening almost at all. I don't see that happening at all because there's just so many variables there that someone who understands architecture would need to apply so that it makes sense and that it works. But generating these prototypes to just put something out and test something, soon everyone's just going to be able to describe it and have it out there, and that's really exciting. I don't think there's never been a better time to be a builder and a creator and a founder right now, because we're literally entering the phase of bringing our ideas to life instantly, and that's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. There's going to be good and there's going to be bad. Obviously, it's going to create a lot of noise too, right? Because at some point, you needed to be very technical to be able to put something out. And that meant that there was less people putting things out. What does it mean when everyone can launch a website and a web and a mobile app now? There's going to be implications, but there's going to be, I think, natural corrections also that fix these negative implications. And we'll find out.
Well, speaking of validation, I wanted to put this on the screen from your channel.
Okay.
Let's all have a look at this together.
Oh no. Today. This is Ned 5 years ago when he started his startup. I asked 3 of his closest friends, what happened to Ned?
Ned did not validate.
Ned didn't validate.
Ned didn't validate.
What does that mean? Well, any good product delivers value. The startup is the vehicle that delivers that value to as many people who need it. More value, more growth, more revenue. But if you don't make sure what you're building is something people actually want and need, you may go in the wrong direction for a long time and end up somewhere you really don't want to be. It's not a good place.
Okay, but what actually happened to Ned?
That's in the past. The most important thing is that it doesn't happen to you. Stay tuned for season 2 of MVP Lab. Step-by-step guides to bring your tech ideas to life on AWS, featuring my AI assistant, Isaac Schwarzenegger. Welcome to MVP Lab. Like and share.
That is so awesome.
Why did you do that to me? Why did you have to show that while I was here? That's like,
so. Well, how did you get the budget for all those extras?
Yeah.
It's a really weird. Now we talk about like wow moments and weird feelings as we're working with generative AI. I've been kind of creating these like short films and writing scripts and stuff for a long time. The fact that I can do this now as just like a script and an execution in a few days and have these personas and characters that I designed and then brought to life and kind of directed in a certain ways. And until now, where I had to use maybe between like 6 to 8 different softwares to get things, working together and being lifelike and stuff. And soon it's just going to become like, much easier to get these things done. But the fact that these non-human actors, as I call them, can just come into your creative work and or be used like with the Synthesia's example, for example, for sales training, for HR, for things like that. Is really amazing, and it's obviously going to change also the creative fields, like filmmaking and stuff like that. It's going to become you're going to be able to really create scenes where they're acting and making you feel things convincingly, and it might be some AI actors with real actors, and that's going to also open up the gates for a lot more people to create content and create these films where they wouldn't have these access, and that's like another thing, right? So the technological barriers to entry are down, so people can create tech products, but at the same time, the people who wish that they could create a show and they had great ideas and they were great writers, but there was no producer who would answer their calls and they didn't have the budget to hire a cast and stuff. The fact that they can also create things right now, that's going to be also very interesting.
It's funny. 2 of my kids, they have this idea for like basically a fan fiction, like a sequel to one of their favorite stories.
Yeah.
And, beforehand that would have just been an idea. Maybe they would have, written it down and that would have been the end of it. But now we can let's try and I want to use your approach, Stability, Runway, 11 Labs. Yeah. We can make some voices. We can make it. We can even make a YouTube video and put it out there and see if people like it. Maybe they make a little side money on it. Yeah. It's all that stuff is accessible without having a production budget, and that would be that's hard. It's just a story idea that we want to try, and we can do it like in an afternoon.
Much lower, much lower, almost non-existent barriers to entry in all of these industries and fields, and that's going to cause confusion for a while, and like just figuring out how do we sort through the stuff. Then how do you pick what you want to watch and stuff when there's so much out there. But if you look back, always transformational technologies figure themselves out somehow. Like, and it's just natural. It's funny, like when I try to look at what we're going through right now, and often like I hear people talking about this technology like it's this foreign thing. Well, I mean, we are part of nature. We made this technology, so there is a way to see it as an extension of nature, right? Like, why are we seeing like us and this technology far from nature? We're breathing in the air. We're here. We made this. It's here now. So somehow it is part of the natural cycle for this to develop, and natural cycles have their ways of figuring themselves out over time. But it is definitely going to be weird. It's going to get weird very quickly in the next phase. Yeah,
very, very exciting times. So Basil, this is a channel called AWS Made Easy, and I wouldn't do justice, to this conversation if I didn't ask you a few questions in that direction. Sure. So, given all the excitement of all the new services, particularly in generative AI, things that startups are constantly looking at, what are your top 3 picks for services that, if someone who's just getting into the AWS ecosystem or the AWS world, that they shouldn't miss out? They should absolutely look at it as being something that's simple, transformative, and valuable to them as they are starting up in this ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and one of the first narratives I wrote when I joined, because I felt like, it's a double-edged sword. The fact that there's so many services and so much power at your fingertips that it can sometimes become overwhelming for new people entering the ecosystem, especially startup founders who may not have a DevOps background and understand how these services work together. So one of the kinds of frameworks and approaches that I created that is also being made into a more advanced form now is I called it NAMA. So it's no code AI microservices APIs, and just figuring out how these building blocks work together. And there's a lot of variations of this. And I approached it with MVP Lab is taking this NAMA concept and then saying, well, what kind of prototypes can we build with this? Oftentimes when someone asks me where do I start as either a startup founder or just a builder who wants to build a sample, just a hello world on AWS, I usually point them to Lightsail, because it's just so easy to get a WordPress instance out there. And it also depends on their technical proficiency. Sometimes I'll point someone to an EC2 or just to an S3 bucket with an HTML page. But I usually point to Lightsail with WordPress because it's one of those managed services that makes things very simple. It's under the free tier. So there's a lot of kinds of things that just make that path very simple. It's hard to get lost on that path, basically. So I usually point them there. And then I just start to fill in more blanks. Well, okay, so now you have this instance. Well, now let's look at what could the backend be. I always like that next step, if someone who's technical, is to go directly into the Lambda and the microservices, because that was one of those wow moments for me when it was introduced. Like, wait a second, hold on. You're telling me I could just put a block of code in this function and it runs? Is this like some kind of joke? Like I remember thinking that at the time. Like, I don't need to put a server and like install stuff and then run the code. So this is the next thing that I usually show. And then the API part of just like, how do you connect them then? How can you have that front end, this Lightsail instant? How can you call the back end to do something or to make some kind of analysis or process data? And then the third is adding that, database. So you want to store things somewhere. So then we could talk about DynamoDB or RDS or something like that. And then it just starts to fill out in that way. But then again, if someone's coming from a I'm very interested to see how generative AI can help me point of view, I wouldn't necessarily point them there. I'd tell them go to Bedrock and request access to a model, and then go to the playground. And then chatting, or you're generating images with stability, which generates them absurdly fast. If it's a business who's looking about how can we automate our processes as a team or as an organization, I point them to Amazon Q Business, which is just, the apps that you can create on Amazon Q Business that can take your own particular team dynamic, roles, data, experiences, history, and you start to create these reusable apps that people can start to use, whether they're in HR or in sales and stuff, to also cut out so much time in their daily tasks and adapt that to you. You're not just using something that is this like one size fits all. It's for you and for your kinds of workflows. That's also like it's a massive acceleration of productivity for organizations.
Got it. So if I summarize what you said, number one, don't try to cover the entire breadth. Focus on a problem that you have and try to build it with a small set of services that solve that problem and then grow out of there. And I think that's a really neat piece of advice, because being opinionated about where to get started when you have 200 plus services is a challenge. And I think that's a really nice, neat.
I'm a big believer in jobs to be done, both from a startup point of view when you're building something to really, it's not about your solution. It's not about how amazing your algorithm is. It's what are the jobs to be done that this user is coming to do? Because if you deviate your focus from that, you will go off the deep end at some point. If you're laser focused on that, which is part of also, the one of the philosophies that I loved about Amazon when I joined is this customer obsession and working backwards from that. And I always focus on those, working backwards from those jobs to be done. Because I have found that within AWS, because we understand how amazing these things are, we sometimes get overexcited of just telling everyone about everything. Like there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this. And it's amazing to technical people who can appreciate and grasp all of these things. But someone who's not, it's absolutely overwhelming. So I always look at just that direct entry point to what do they need done. And the amazing thing about AWS is there's always that entry point. There's so many services, whether they're infrastructure services or innovation services, where you can just plug in and try something.
Excellent. I think that's one of the best answers I've had in quite a while for this specific question. I want to ask the flip side of this, which is, what are the 3 pieces of advice you'd give someone to not do, particularly in the area around cost of these services? It's given that the pricing for a typical service is across so many different dimensions, trying to understand exactly what something is going to cost you is really hard, particularly for newbies. Newbies are just starting. Something looks good, they go wholeheartedly into it, not realizing, at the end of the month, this is going to be, gifted this amazing massive bill that's going to give you a heart attack.
That heart attack email, I was just going to say. Yes.
So what's your advice for how someone should think about, like, just your mental model going into AWS as a newbie? What should they watch out for? What should they...
I think one of the, especially with pricing, one of the key things is don't assume. Really understand and get familiar with the cost calculators, billing alerts before you really start to experiment even. And they're fairly intuitive to work through, but just give it a little bit of time to grasp that. And then you can be much more confident when experimenting. But when you assume that, no, this is not going to cost me, or you're assuming this is in the free tier, or you're assuming this and that, or you're assuming that you even stopped that service after testing this thing out, because that we were talking about how amazing it is, that power at your fingertips to launch this very powerful server with how many RAMs and how many GPUs and how many stuff. It's incredible, but sometimes you get, because it's so easy, you get overexcited and not realize that this is a very special resource that you need to treat as such. So even if you're going to experiment with it, don't forget to stop it or delete it or whatever you need to do so you don't get those charges. So don't assume. Really understand how the pricing works. And the great thing about AWS, which I think I mentioned earlier when I used it for the first time, is that there are so many solution architects and account managers and just people who will help you figure this stuff out. You don't have to figure it out completely alone. I mean, there's a lot of resources to understand it, but you can talk to people, and it's literally in their best interest to help you not have those bad experiences and to save costs and to keep things as efficient as possible. It's not out of the kindness of anyone's heart. It's literally their best interest. So utilize those resources because they're really there to help you be able to figure things out without having any negative experiences and being more and more confident to use AWS.
It's amazing just how much that echoes the other AWS folks we've talked to. You know, we talked to Steph Gooch on the optics team, or Rick Oakes, who's doing the compute optimizer. Lots of Yuri with the cloud intelligence dashboards. All these folks who are building tools and helping people save. And it's in the long-term best interest that you get good value out of your cloud spend.
Yeah.
And you come back and you know that Amazon is a platform that you can build on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm going to dig in one more. I'm just going to add to a little bit about what you said because I think it's extremely pertinent. When you said don't assume and actually get in and do the calculations, it's really important to do that because across all the AWS pricing pages, you will see a typical unit costing a fraction of $1.
Yeah.
And it doesn't strike you as something that's going to be, that's going to kind of flare up and do something big. Like even Lambdas, like 1 million requests will cost you $1.
Yeah.
But a mistake can make you fire 1 million Lambdas very easily because it scales infinitely almost. Similarly, something that costs you a fraction of, a cent, the fact that you're running it for a month could, you're basically multiplying everything by 720.
Yeah.
So, it's almost 1,000-fold when you actually get the bill. And it doesn't occur to you mentally when you're looking at those.
Yes.
It's worth taking the time to actually do the math and say,
absolutely,
this is what it's going to cost me on a monthly basis, which is what is going to impact you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. And one of the things that I want to add to this is one of the great values of AWS is the ecosystem of partners and the ecosystem that's there also to help you in different ways and also sometimes very specialized ways depending on your use case or your industry. So using Cloudfix, for example, to be able to optimize things is a great benefit of being part of that ecosystem. So AWS offers a lot, and there's a lot of help that's both technology based, but also as strategic business partners and assistants and solution architects and account managers. But then you have this entire world of partners who are there to help in additional ways that are sometimes very specific to you also. So, and that's all part of the AWS ecosystem to help you move forward and bring things to life. And this is why it's this great ecosystem to be part of.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, there's nothing I could add to that. That's great.
Very, very well articulated. I know we've taken a lot of your time, Basil, but thank you so much for coming on the show.
I've really enjoyed it.
Amazing.
Really enjoyed it.
We need to have you back on the show to talk about so much more of this stuff.
I'd be honored. I feel like we just started. I mean, I've been having so much fun.
No, I see it. I love these long form. I wish we could do like these 5-6 hour ones. Yeah. Maybe we will. When we're all in Dubai at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah, that might be a pretty neat thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. we need to have like a super long form Joe Rogan like conspiracies and aliens podcast. Maybe we'll deviate from technology for a while, but it's going to be worth it.
There we go. 6-hour mega episode. We're going to cover
the secret
everything.
labs of AWS building these amazing chips. Yeah.
There we go. But until then, where do people find you online?
So I'm Basil Fateen on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Basil Fateen on Earth, so it's going to be very easy to find me. Please reach out to me there if you have any questions, whether about AWS or startups or generative AI, or you want to ask anything about what we talked about today. Other than that, the YouTube channel is MVP Lab. That channel is going to have the new videos, but also everything on that channel is currently being adapted as official learning paths on startups.aws, and I'm really, really proud of that. That's going to be part of the introductions to startup founders, and we're working on a lot of new things also in that direction with all of the advancements of generative AI. There's something I'm working on now, which I'm calling it an agentic deployment environment, where you can actually launch resources using an agent, using just one simple CloudFormation script that I provide that installs a web app and then helps you launch other CloudFormation scripts using an agent. So it's just a very different kind of entry point into helping you launch these prototypes on AWS using very much AI first, so please stay tuned, reach out to me, because things are moving fast and it's exciting times, and I'd really love to hear from everyone.
We will have all of your links in the video description. Basil, thank you so much for your time, and we will see you hopefully soon in person, and if not, we'll do another one online.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.